Worth mentioning that verbs of forming or making or building typically govern two accusatives. Okay, let me show it. What do I mean by that? Do you see the English has make it of acacia wood, okay, of acacia wood in each of these?
Yeah.
That's the English. Hebrew has a double accusative, okay? Ve'asita, ve'asu, ve'asita, all of these verbs, they govern two things. They govern the what is done, et hakirashim lamishkan, aron, shulchan. Okay, that's the first element that goes back to the verb ve'asu or ve'asita. And the second element that goes back is the material of which you make that first element. So you see the double accusative, the verb gets two accusative. The regular accusative, mentioning the direct accusative, what is made, and the second one is the accusative of the material, denoting the physical material of which the first one is to be made. Are you with me, guys? There is no other proposition or something here. Okay, it's directly going back to the verb, modifying which is the material that is the first accusative to be made of which the first accusative should be made. Are you with me, guys? Do you see the syntax here?
Yes.
Yes, very good.
Yeah.
Different languages have different morphological and syntactical conventions. Okay, another very important word here in this slide to refer to, because it repeats itself so many times, and it repeats itself many more times in the building of anything in the Bible, practically, is the word Amma. Amatayim v'chetzi, ve'ama v'chetzi, ve'ama v'chetzi, amatayim, ama, ve'ama v'chetzi. So ama, amatayim, measurements, okay? So we have amatayim, which is the dual form of this measurement. Generally speaking, measurements in the Bible are not just, but we have some of them based on the human body. By the way, very common to different languages and different cultures. And the amma is the length of the hand. Okay, traditionally from the top of the hand up all the way to the elbow. How much is an amma? About half a meter. Okay. This is the question of how exactly what long was the amma. So it differed, and we have actually the answer, roughly half a meter, is not a bad answer. We have different lengths of cubits of amma, okay, and we compare in the few cases that we have that we know a certain place should be based on the Bible, so and so cubits, and we have that place to measure. We see that there is no 100% consistency. So it ranges between 48 centimeters to 52 centimeters and so forth. So that's roughly half a meter or a foot and a third, roughly. Okay, that's roughly the measurement of the amot. And since we've dealt with the material of which so many things in the Mishkan should be made. The boards and the ark and the table. By the way, not just these are from the Parashat, but we have more from the Parashat and outside the Parashat. The staves, those poles that enabled lifting and carrying the tabernacle, and the altar, the incense altar, incense, not the outer altar, and other elements are all made of the shita or shittim. What is this acacia wood? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the acacia wood. Okay, yes, Frank.
Is there direct scientific evidence to accurately determine that Shittim is actually acacia?
Okay, that's a complicated question. Am I storing the original Ark of the Covenant in the other room and I've tested the material of which it is made? The answer is no. But, and it deals with a question that we did in the past. How do we did it when we talked about the Kikayon of Jonah. We went through the process of trying to understand flora and fauna in Biblical Hebrew. The title was Flora and Fauna in the Book of Jonah, because it rhymed. And we've talked about how do you approach this from a scholarly point of view. How do you try and go back to the Bible and say, this shita or shittim, how do we recognize that this is indeed this tree or another tree? How do we deal with, in this case, flora in the Bible? But it's a branch of a bigger question, biblical realism. Okay, so while the most important thing about the Bible for us is the message of the Bible is important for us. In order to understand that message, we have to know the realism of the biblical times, but also everything in the Bible is important for us. So how do we know when the Bible talks about Zait, that this is an olive tree? When the Bible talks about Tamar, that this is a palm date, right? When the Bible talks about the Shita or the Shittim, it's a acacia. Do you remember some of the ways by which we can kind of open the window for these questions? I'll mention a few. First of all, we have tradition, right? Like Tevya, tradition, right? We have tradition. But we have other elements. We have ancient world sources. So for instance, if the Septuagint translates acacia in a certain way, and we know the meaning of these Greek words, or we have tradition about these Greek words, it gives us a certain testimony about how the translators of the Septuagint 22 roughly 100 years ago, 2200 understood acacia to be, okay, or shittim to be. We have the name shita. Maybe the name itself has a certain meaning that is related to the tree itself. By the way, it does. Okay, and the context. Let's say in this case, okay, that you build the tabernacle in the desert from the acacia wood, okay, because the Bible talks about that. So if the acacia would not be found anywhere in the desert, but would be an Arctic tree, let's say. It only grows in the Arctic Circle. Then obviously it would not fit the description. So we have certain elements by which we can approach this subject, generally speaking. Now, in regards to the acacia, I've never seen any scholar or any scholar that really debated this question because it fits so many of these above mentioned categories. The discussion is which acacia wood, because acacia is a family of trees, and which we have Acacia tortilis, the Negev acacia, the twisted acacia, the white acacia. Which acacia exactly was the acacia of the tabernacle? Okay, and again, all of the elements that we've mentioned, or maybe not all, but some of these elements that we've mentioned in this, in response to your question, are involved with the question of which acacia is the relevant acacia, right? Remember that we have different lengths for the wood for the temple, okay, and the within going through all of the boards in the side, you had the middle board, habariach hatichon, and that was 30 cubits. Okay, 30 cubits should be around 50 feet or 45 feet, somewhere between 45 and 50 feet, depending on what length of a cubit you count. So maybe you have to have a tree that can provide you with a board that would be at least 45 feet. Okay, so this is an example of how the discussion about the biblical reality contributes to the defining of which, or the question which acacia specifically is the acacia of the tabernacle. You see the type of discussions that are relevant, guys? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, let's talk a little bit about the shita, or the shittim, the acacia. So first of all, the name, in English and in Hebrew, the word shita might be related to Egyptian word for thorn, okay, sant, okay, or because in biblical Hebrew, shita, with a dagesh in the tet, we've already mentioned that the dagesh inside a certain letter may indicate a nun there, so it may be related to shin, nun, and tet. Okay, thorn, some kind of a thorn, and the shita does have thorns, very interesting thorns. We'll talk about them in a second. So that's the shita. Do we have them in the desert, guys? Anyone been to the Israeli desert, guys?
We have it here in UAE.
You have it in the UAE, right? And so we do have it in the desert, both in Sinai and in Israel. Not all of the types are everywhere, but we do have the shita. I don't want to get into the specific details of where each of the types of the acacia are in the desert, but it's a fascinating tree. And it's a fascinating tree in its way to fit the type of life that we have in the desert. What's wrong? What's bad about the desert, guys? What's the problem with the desert?
Water.
Water. In one word, water. Right. So how does the acacia tree deals with the lack of water in order to stay strong so the people of Israel could take wood from it to build the tabernacle, guys.
Deep water.
So we have few techniques. We've started. So the main problem, as you said, water. Okay. Water. How do we deal with water? How does the acacia wood deal with the water, the acacia tree? So someone mentioned already deep roots. So depth is maybe, let's go with technique number one. It does have a deep root, but it does not have just a deep root. Okay? It has two sets of roots. One of them is indeed deep and diving down to reach, if in a certain case you have deep water. So the acacia has a set of roots that goes directly down. However, the acacia has a second set of roots that is very superficial in a sense, okay? In order to use absorption for the cases where the desert has floods. You know that the desert sometimes has flooding, okay? The water, one of the reasons is that the earth does not, in the desert, doesn't, oftentimes when there is rain, the rain gets the ground to, gets to the point where the ground is sealed, okay, because of the type of the land that you may have, and then everything flows. Shuva Adonai et shevitenu ka'afikim b'negev. Return, O Lord, us from captivity, like the flooding of the Negev, of the desert, right? Because there is various torrents. Yeah.
Is it connected? I think once in one session you said that it is connected with like the wadi.
Yeah, to the wadi. Yeah, you see Shittim in the wadis as well. Yeah. And the torrents go through the wadis. Yes, Maureen?
Underground aquifers, and they flow underground and not on top. Aquifers.
Come again?
The aquifers, the water.
Yeah, the aquifers are under the ground, because what happens with an aquifer, it gets to an aquiclude, and then you have like a sponge filled with water under the ground. But it depends on the type of
flow. Yes, they flow underground.
Right, but it depends on the type of land you have. In any case, so the second set of roots is actually superficial and based on absorption. Okay. Moreover, how do you deal with lack of water? We have efficiency. Efficiency means that the type of leaves that we have with the acacia are small leaves, and it knows how to regulate how open they are, or in order to prevent the water from evaporation. So we have efficiency, and that's not the only element of efficiency that we see with the acacia wood. Okay, so we have depth, we have absorption. It is able to regulate the evaporation by closing the leaves, or by having small leaves. Okay, and even when need be, the tree could be dormant. Okay, dormancy, if you will, up until the time it has it has water. So you see, sometimes the acacia does the opposite of other trees, and it would be without leaves in the summer rather than the winter, right? Other trees would have the fall in the fall, right? Which means that they would stand bare in the winter. But the acacia can have a fall in the summer to prevent the evaporation of water. Okay, so that's the mainest strategies. So dormancy and even prioritizing core elements in the tree over peripheral elements. So certain desert vegetations, be that a tree or a bush or something, you can see that they would dry out the parts of the tree or the bush or whatever that is far from the core, okay, in order to invest the resources in parts that are closer to the core of the tree. So we have prioritization. Prioritizing. Okay, so that's dealing with water. And this is how the acacia could wait in the desert for the people to build it. These are different types of acacia trees. By the way, they have other interesting desert strategies that are not directly related to water, but are also interesting. And the first and foremost is the one that might have given the acacia its own name, both in Hebrew and in Greek, and that is the thorns. The thorns of the acacia are very interesting. They tell us the type of thorns that we have, probably tell us that the acacia comes from Africa. Why? Because the thorns of the acacia are kind of built to deal with both elephants and giraffes. Okay, they have two types of thorns. Maybe when we get to the desert, maybe we'll get to see an acacia wood. We'll be able to see them together, and maybe that tells us that this tree originally came from Africa. Okay, and these thorns protect the tree from eating it. Again, depending it part of the defense system in the nature. By the way, another element is we have tannins. Tannins is kind of a material, chemical material that is preventing a lot of tannins in the acacia, makes it not so good for pests and for animals to eat it. So it's not a big, they don't like eating it so much. Again, part of protecting itself. It can pull, okay, it can create its own fertilizer with symbiosis with a certain bacteria. This is something that we see with other plants as well. Okay, so I'm not getting into the whole science behind it, but it can nourish itself in a certain way, and again, it can decide how much it grows, a little bit like it decides what to not nourish, and then to prioritize what is important for it in order to survive. Yes, Anne?
It makes little bitty knots on the roots that provide nourishment. And what is special about the acacia tree too is that it can absorb some salt. So if you do some watering and you have the problem with salt in the ground after the water is evaporated, then an acacia tree can absorb the salt.
Definitely. This is many of the things that I've mentioned are very characteristic of desert plants. So you go to the desert, you see these elements, you see it in several plants, and it's beautiful to see how they're designed to deal with the desert with different ways, but some of those ways repeat with different plants. So certainly the ability to sustain more salt. Some of the desert plants, you go to the desert, you actually can take the leaves and taste the salt, by the way, which is nice. Okay. Now, maybe going back to Frank's question, with the identifying what is the acacia, because the shita is not just mentioned as a building material in the stories of the Mishkan, but also in this prophecy of restoration. Okay, it's a one of those trees mentioned by Isaiah in this verse. Eten bamidbar erez shita vahadas ve'etz shamen asim ba'arava berosh tidhar ve'ta'ashur yachdav. Many trees, one verse. Erez, shita, hadas, etz shemen, berosh tidhar and ta'ashur. Okay, we know that midbar and arava are paralleled in many places in the Bible. We have eten and asim, both of them are first person common singular yiftol verbs, again paralleled with one another. And again, by the way, note what we said about the balancing of the words. Okay, so we add the word yachdav together to create this balance. Okay, so we have two parallel lines with 7 different types of trees. And how do we understand this prophecy? Because the rest of these, Erez, Hadas, Etz Shemen, Berosh, Tidhar, and Ta'ashur, are not desert trees. So what does it mean in Isaiah that he says that I will give these in the desert? Seemingly, the shita is already in the desert. It's not anything new. Okay?
But when the shiti starts out, then it makes a good climate for the other trees, and the desert will be green.
But they're already in the desert. So why does Isaiah have to say, this prophecy, what does it mean? So the rabbis said that the shita, some of the rabbis suggested the shita is tornita. Again, basing our understanding of things based on other ancient sources. The word for toren is mast, long straight tree. You need a long straight tree for a mast. The shita is not an ideal tree for that. Okay, and the rest of these trees, like cedar, fir tree, pine, these are more like straight. So maybe the shita here, maybe we should understand the prophecy a little bit different, or understand the identification of the shita a little bit different. Again, not getting into it all the way, just giving you food for thought here. And maybe the prophecy just want to say that there's going to be both desert tree and non-desert tree in the desert, and not just non-desert tree in the desert. Big discussion. We don't have the time for it, but the shita is here mentioned in this prophetic eschatological vision. And it's not just that. Also in this beautiful, beautiful verse of Yoel, we have Nachal Hashitim, V'haya bayom hahu, Yitefu ha'arim asis, V'hageva'ot telachna chalav, V'chol afikei Yehuda, Yelechu mayim, U'ma'ayan mibet Adonai yetze, V'hishka et Nachal Hashitim, Nachal Hashitim, the wadi or the of the Shittim. Okay, where is this place? Nachal HaShittim. So we have several places in the Bible identified as related to Shittim. You see that I'm reading, guys, because of time issues. Vayeshev Israel b'Shittim, vayachel ha'am liznot el benot Moav. Israel stayed at Shittim. ויחנו על הירדן מבית הישימות עד אבל השיטים בערבות Moav. And Joshua, the famous spies that are sent to Jericho, וישלח יהושע בן נון מן השיטים שניים אנשים מרגלים חרש לאמור לכו ראו את הארץ ואת יריחו. So Joshua is sending the spies from Shittim. You call Shittim a place that has a lot of acacia trees. Okay, so that's Shittim. But where is Nachal HaShittim? Is there a Nachal HaShittim? Which is Nachal HaShittim? Some claim that Nachal HaShittim is the Wadi of Kidron that is outside of Jerusalem. U'ma'ayan mi bet Adonai yetzeh ve'ishka et Nachal HaShittim, flowing eastwards towards the Dead Sea. Some claim that this is the Wadi of Kidron. Others have suggested that this is a general term for a dry wadi, more of a desert wadi, like the wadis in the desert where you see those shittim. Okay, so maybe this ma'ayan is going to flow to the desert and make those wadis where you can only find these shittim trees, and they will become more fertile with other trees as well, somewhat similar to prophecies that we've seen with Isaiah and with Ezekiel as well. So think about the prophecy of Ezekiel with water that heal the Dead Sea. Yes, Frank?
Yeah, from what I see for the properties of the Shittim, it may have been wise to build the implements for the Mishkan and so forth, the Aron, because bugs will not be chewing that stuff up.
Right. Again, we've talked about the tannins, and I said it's not so tasty for the bugs. So yeah, there is a discussion. Again, interesting details. Again, we couldn't get into all of it, but as always, it has been a pleasure, guys. I hope you didn't get too much, I don't know, discussion about trees today. But, you know,
Never enough. Never enough.
We mix it up. We try to make it interesting. So grammar, but maybe, remember, I'm also a tour guide and a hiking instructor. So sometimes nature, sometimes this, history. Yeah, if you keep on coming, it's your fault. You know, shame on fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me, fool me a million times. You know, anyway, everyone should look back.
No, Netanel, we're just gluttons for punishment.
Okay, very good.
Shalom,
Any
Shabbat.
Catholics in the crowd, right?
Right.
All right, very good. See you guys, and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat
Shalom.
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 Shalom.